Bárbara directs MEXZOMBIES. This is a 2022 Mexican equivalent of Shaun of the Dead or Zombieland, or at least that I believe is the intention here. So this is a kind of horror comedy that follows a group of teenagers around kind of 14, 15 years old. And we see at the beginning there is some type of drug being made, and it's an experimental drug that the side effect of it being created zombies. Inevitably this kind of gets out, and it ends up infecting someone in this kind of gated community. And this is kind of the first sort of outbreak, really. So at the moment it is contained to this gated community, and it actually takes place on Halloween. And we have this group of kids that sort of start to become wise to it, including one kid who is kind of from outside of this gated community, from a kind of a poorer area. And they have to try and convince the residents of this gated community to wise up and realise that these people wandering about looking like zombies aren't in fact people doing trick-or-treats and are actually real zombies, and try and defeat them. What will happen? You'll have to watch the film and find out. So let's talk about it. It's quite a kind of slick production, I have to say, and it's obviously very referential in regards to its, you know, having lots of kind of nods and winks to various kind of zombie genres and films and filmmakers, even things like Michael Jackson's Thriller down to, you know, the aforementioned Zombieland and Shaun of the Dead. It's a fun film in many ways. It is a horror comedy, but it's not a sort of spoof. It is sort of a, you know, a movie in the same vein as Zombieland, where it has some funnier elements, but there is some comedic stuff kind of going on too. So I think if you're a fan of movies like Zombieland, then I think maybe you'll enjoy this. A little bit more detail. The production value I think is pretty strong here. You know, it's all sort of taking place in this this quite wealthy neighbourhood, so it all looks kind of you know, okay, a nice place to live, and there's various different kind of houses and buildings that we kind of go into. Our kids are kind of like a quite fun group. And they are played by, you know, when you say teenagers, you know, you were expecting 25-year-olds playing like, you know, teenagers, but these are actually relatively young, so it has that sort of Stranger Things sort of element to it as well. We have a group of legitimately younger people kind of being our kind of protagonists. There are some kind of funny elements here. If you are a fan of the zombie genre, you'll appreciate some of the winks and nods. It maybe tries a little bit too hard in regards to some of that, I think, and maybe fails to have its own identity, but nonetheless it is still kind of quite fun hearing all these references. There's one guy who calls himself Kronos. He's like clearly like a zombie sort of horror film fanboy, and is constantly kind of spewing out these references and things like that. One of the fun elements here is because this is taking place on Halloween, everyone's kind of in a costume, so you'll get people in Vikings costumes, you know, things like that. There was a guy dressed up, the one American character is dressed up like Rambo and stuff, so like there's some fun elements here where we have sort of zombies and kind of different sort of costuming and things like this, which makes it kind of a fun, you know, fun times. It's relatively gory without being too explicit. The zombie makeup I think is pretty good. There's the decent kind of practical effects here. There are some directorial kind of flourishes and little kind of elements here where you'll just have these stylistic choices that kind of lean into that sort of that fun horror comedy element to it. And there is actually a little bit of social commentary about the kind of the class system in Mexico, really, about how this one guy is from the kind of the poorer part of town, and you know how he's sort of treated more with classism, I guess, than anything else. But they sort of refer to it as racism, but it's, I guess it's more sort of you know, class warfare to a degree. But there is a little bit of commentary on that, and other things as well. It kind of goes into the kind of a few other kind of stereotypes and stuff. Overall, it's on the positives, it's a relatively kind of fun movie. It doesn't take itself too seriously. It's kind of tongue in cheek. There are some kind of nice kind of visual touches. The zombies are played for somewhat laughs, but they can still look pretty cool and stuff like that. And it's violent enough. The cast are a likeable group of teens, and there's some kind of fun characters in there to a point, which leads me on to what doesn't work. I mean, it's a horror comedy. Some of the characters I think work better than others. Are kind of one American kid who I don't really know why he's there. He doesn't really seem to speak Spanish. So he speaks English while everyone else speaks Spanish basically. He seems a little out of place, so maybe to have a few English lines in, but he's the gun-toting one because of course he's American. And again, seems a little out of place. Some of the acting is a little bit hit and miss, sometimes harder to judge on, when I'm not listening to kind of the English language, but it's a little bit of a mixed bag. But there are some kind of performances which are a little bit on the kind of the hokey side. Some of the characters are a little broad. We have a kind of like a female drug lord, for example, who didn't really need to be in it, if I'm honest. I mean, there's a couple of fun scenes, but she doesn't really add much to it outside of giving our kids weapons. But again, it just feels like there could have been a little bit more done with it to a certain degree. And again, with our kids, some of the characteristics do seem a little bit on the sort of the broad side. I think the movie has an interesting kind of setup, and it has some a fun sort of premise. But once we kind of get going into the kind of the full-on running around from the zombies, it is pure generic at that point. It doesn't really sort of do much to sort of stand out from the crowd, and it ultimately becomes, I think, more of a paler imitation of movies like sort of Zombieland and Shaun of the Dead. It doesn't really end up sort of feeling too unique or standing on its own feet. It's never I would say a bad movie, but it ends up being kind of like a kind of somewhat stereotypical zombie film, really. And it's much trying to be referential to other zombie films. By doing so, it almost sort of robs it of its kind of own identity to a degree. I mean, maybe you've got the whole fact that it's obviously you have this kind of the Mexican angle and this kind of class sort of system that it sort of really sort of tries to comment on, but it only ever really takes place in this gated community. So that's all that we ever see. So, it's not like it's spilling out into the poorer parts of Mexico City and stuff. Some of the kind of the lighter tone, I think, is at odds when people are kind of dying and stuff like that. It's an okay zombie film. If you don't mind a lighter touch, then I think it's a fun watch. I don't think it really sort of stands on its own as its own voice or its own sort of classic movie that I think will be remembered by as fondly as say Zombieland or Shaun of the Dead. But it is a fun, good enough zombie film with some kind of like nice little directorial flourishes, but maybe not enough of its own voice to really be a true classic. 6 out of 10 for me. Have you seen it? What did you think? Please leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.